Me. Once upon a time, away over in the mission field, there lived a little girl called Mimi. When she was 6 years old, her mother brought her to the mission school, and her face was all dirty, and her hands were all dirty, and her dress was all dirty, and her feet were all dirty, and in her nose was a dirty little string with a dirty little penny tied on it, and in her ears were two more dirty little strings with dirty little pennies tied onto them. Around her neck was another dirty little string with more dirty pennies tied onto it. Around her stomach was another dirty little string with more dirty pennies tied onto it. And around her wrist were two more dirty little strings with more dirty little pennies tied onto them. And around her ankles were two more dirty little strings with dirty little pennies tied onto them. And our missionary looked at that dirty little girl and said, "What's your name, little girl?" And she said, "My name is Mimi." Now, Mimi means kitty, so the missionary said, "Isn't that a lovely name for a lovely little girl who wants to come here to school?" Then he said, "Mimi, what is that dirty little string with the dirty little penny tied on it in your nose for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can't get into my head." And the missionary said, "Aha, and what are those dirty little strings with the dirty little pennies tied onto them in your ears for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can get into my ears." And the missionary said, "Aha, and what is that dirty little string with dirty little pennies tied onto it around your neck for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can get inside of me." And the missionary said, "Aha, and what is that dirty little string with the dirty little pennies tied onto it around your stomach for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can make my stomach ache." And the missionary said, "Aha, and what are those two dirty little strings with the dirty little pennies tied onto them around your wrists for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can make me do bad things with my hands." And the missionary said, "Aha, and what are those dirty little strings with the dirty little pennies tied onto them around your ankles for?" And Mimi said, "That's so as the devils can make me fall over when I'm running along." And the missionary said, "Aha." Then he looked into Mimi's little face and said, "Mimi, do you know what that you needn't be afraid of the devils while you are here at our mission school? For God has more good angels than there are fence posts around the mission, and they won't let a single devil hurt anyone who is here." Then Mimi said, "Uh-huh." And she went over to the girl's house and she took a pair of scissors and she cut off the dirty little string in her nose. And she cut off the dirty little strings in her ears, and she cut off the dirty little strings around her neck, and she cut off the dirty little strings around her stomach, and she cut off the dirty little strings around her wrists, and she cut off the dirty little strings around her ankles, and she put them all away. Then the schoolmother gave her a clean dress and some soap, and Mimi went down to the river with the other girls and she washed till her face was all clean, and her hands were all clean, and her feet were all clean. Then she got dressed in her clean dress, and the big girls combed her hair, and you should have seen Mimi. She was one of the sweetest little girls in all the school, and you should have heard her singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know." One day the missionary went over to the school and said, "How many would like to go with me in the motor boat to Mimi's village this afternoon?" And every one of the 26 boys and girls put up both hands, they were so happy to go. After school they got into the motor boat, and the missionary started the engine, untied the rope, and away they went. Pop, 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 all the way to the Mimi's village. Then they got out and stood in a big ring around the missionary and sang, "Jesus loves me, this I know." And while they sang, their mothers and fathers and uncles and aunties and grandpas and grandmas, their nieces and nephews, and all their little cousins came running to hear. "Oh, who are these children singing such beautiful songs?" they said. "Are these angels out of heaven?" "Why, no, these are not angels. These are your children," the missionary replied. "Oh, no, they are not. No, they are not," they said. Our children don't have clean faces like that. Our children don't have clean dresses like that. And the missionary said, "They are too, your children." Then he saw Mimi's mother standing there, and he said, "Don't you know your own little girl, Mimi? This is your little Mimi." And Mimi's mother went up close, and she felt her face, and she felt her dress, and she looked, and she looked. Then she grinned and said, "So it is. So it is. It is my little Mimi, and I didn't know her because she was so clean." After the meeting, there was a little time for visiting, and the missionary went up into Mimi's house to visit with Mimi's mother. As he was going up the bamboo ladder, he saw Mimi run over to her mother and put something in her hand. Then, holding her mother's hand shut tight in both of hers, she danced up and down and she said, "Mother, we don't need this any more now. Mother, because up at the mission school there are so many good angels that they won't let the devils come anywhere near us." The missionary wondered what it was that Mimi put in her mother's hand, so he went up close till he could peek into Mimi's mother's hand. And what do you think he saw? All those dirty little strings with all the dirty little pennies tied onto them. Mimi had given them all back to her mother, and Mimi was so happy, and her mother was so happy, and the missionary was so happy, and I think Jesus was happy too. Don't you?